Today I'm going to show you guys how to make the Gunther barbed arrowhead. Now this is a cool kind of arrowhead that was used around the Oregon-California border area up until historic times. Now these are tricky arrowheads to make because they've got a couple of delicate features. They have a concave base and they have a little stem in the center of it, and then they also have these tend to have these long, really fragile barbs that come down way past the base. So it's very easy to break off, has a lot of delicate features. But with practice, you can turn out these exquisite arrow points. But you want to start with either a thin flake or you want to start with a preform, something like this, and get it as thin as possible, especially around the base, the midsection and then the basal area. That's going to be the most important aspect of making these points successfully. One of the most delicate features of this is first starting off and creating this concave base. You really want to make sure you've got good support here. And you want your flakes to detach cleanly, so you really need to set your edges up carefully. I'm using a split piece of a deer leg bone. I'm back flaking on that edge, really trying to get a stout platform there that I can then press in and get those flakes to really go. I need this base to be thin. It's important because all the rest of it is going to, the success of this point is going to depend on how thin you can get that base. The thinner you can get it, the less pressure you're going to have to use later on. Now that last flake created a ridge right here, and I'm going to set up my edge and then attempt to push that flake and make it follow that ridge. Back flaking. Really got to get your support good on these, because once these get thin, it's very easy to snap them in half as you press down. Alright, there we go. It's really difficult to try to do this in video at the same time. Okay, I'm switching to my little welding rod flaker. This is just an arc welding rod. It's a 6013, so it's just a mild steel. It's got decent softness, so it's able to grab that edge. It's not as hard as a steel nail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working into this base and creating a stem right here. Back flake on those edges to make sure that edge is steep and stout and strong. Now I'm doing short little crunchy flakes to create that steep bevel to this side, so when I flip it over, that edge leans to the bottom side and creates that platform. And one thing you can do is if you take two flakes off side by side, so I'll take one flake off towards the outside, back flake it a little bit, and then didn't work, got too thin, but take another flake on the inside, so you're taking two flakes off side by side, so you get double the thinning. And it also helps in case you crunch one platform, you mess it up, you have another opportunity to take a flake off and keep going. Because if you get stalled out in here, these can be very difficult to get that flake to detach once you crush that edge in there. So I'm going to take a flake from the outside like that, back flake it a little bit, and then take another flake on the inside. So I'm doing double flakes essentially. And what I'm actually doing is I'm doing this a little early because the point is going to be narrower. But what I want is I want the width and the strength. So I do the notches earlier in the chipping process. Then once I get those notches chipped in and I get that stem formed, then I'm going to bring these edges in very gently and carefully. The two flakes there, side by side. Okay, so I basically just continued pressing flakes off, setting up those edges, doing the double flake removal side by side, and I was able to get this base looking how I want it to. So as you can see, these barbs are a lot wider and it's still got a rough appearance. Now with this base chipped in, now I can chip in the rest of the point, and I'm going to refine it and bring it in. Now, one last feature about these points is they were usually finely serrated, and this point is going to need to have little serrations chipped into the edge. Now, the way I'm going to do that is essentially I'm going to sharpen my tool, and I'm going to be doing the same thing I was doing before, where I'm going to be pinching it in my pad, and I need to really file this tool down so it's very fine, almost like a knife edge. And I will start at the tips and then work my way in into the main body of the point, and then also start at the tips of the barbs and work my way in and really carefully serrate those edges. A little risky because I could end up breaking a barb off if I'm not careful. I had to turn the camera off because it ended up getting too dark that night, and I couldn't see what I was doing, but I did end up finishing the Gunther barb point, and it's a sweet little point. It's sleek, it's got a really sharp tip and barbs and fine serrations along the edge, and boy, that's all it would take. That's all you need to take down a mule deer. I've actually used these points for hunting, and I did take a deer with one years ago. And you would think that those long barbs were fragile and would break off, but in actuality they didn't. The wound channel through the lungs of that deer were wide and showed that the barbs were intact. They actually didn't break off until they hit the far side shoulder blade, and actually broke through the shoulder blade, and it snapped off the tip, one barb, and the stemmed base. But by that point, the point had already done its work. So these points are effective for taking down deer. I've taken deer with them, and that deer didn't make it but maybe 60 yards before it collapsed. I've got to give credit where credit is due, and I learned about these Gunther points through my good friend Steve Allely out in Oregon, and he is a master flint knapper, and he makes some exquisite Gunther barbs. And I've got a number of points that he's made that I've purchased from him. So if you guys are interested in owning some Gunther barb points for yourself, I've actually put the link to his store down below in the description. So you can get some of his stuff, but I'll tell you, his work is fantastic and it goes quickly. So he's got a lot of people who snatch up his work. So you need to watch that site if you want to get some of his points. But he does sell a lot of his points, and boy, they are nice. Like I said, I've got a bunch of his artwork that I keep and treasure for myself. To purchase some of Steve's work, go to flintnappers.com. Scroll down to his store, and there you'll get to feast your eyes on Steve's amazing points. Here are a number of Gunther points I've made of colorful stone. They're beautiful examples of these exquisite arrow points.